Okay, so the last section is modify the program so the rectangle class implements the iComparable interface. Just copy that, and if you implement this interface, it means you have to create this method compare2. So let's do that. So go into rectangle, and it's inheriting from shape, and we're just going to implement. Okay, so that is a class that you're implementing, and that's an interface. If you hover over it, you can see it. So now if I save that and try to run it, you should get an error. And the error is if you implement this interface, now that's different from inheriting, you're implementing an interface. If you implement this interface, you have to create this method. So let's create that method. And we'll just keep that bit of code, just make it public. Okay. And it takes a type object. So every time you create an object, they all inherit from this class, this very, very base class object. So that's why we can put in the type objects. We don't know what kind of object we're going to get, but this is just again an example of polymorphism, whereby you can put in the base class and you can accept any object that inherits from that class. Just like the same way we created a shape, but we could make it of type rectangle. So we just implement this now. Another good thing is if you ever, before you do anything on a parameter that you receive from a method, always check to see, is it null? If you're getting in something as null, because if you try and do something with that object, that could cause your whole program to crash. So very important that you check. That it's not null. And we will also check that we only want to compare rectangle objects. So we'll check if object, if not object is and then we'll throw. So anyone else who is passing information to this, they will realize this thing actually, this method here only accepts rectangles. Okay, so now we've done our little checking. We will actually see what this object is about and what's inside it. So create a new object, rectangle target, and we'll use object. So this is one way of getting the information out from it. So we're going to do a compare to. So this is an object that's coming in from outside, and it's going to compare itself with this rectangle itself. So there are only two variables that describe this rectangle, and multiply the two of them will get us get area. So we'll just compare the areas of rectangles. So we use double because diff wouldn't provide us, if we used int, it wouldn't provide us enough difference between the two possibly. So we'll say this dot get area. So that's getting the area for this rectangle minus the target and the target dot get area. So this is the other rectangle. So we're just going to find the difference between the two. And just to show you, this squiggly line is here because we haven't returned anything yet, and it's worried. The method's worried that we're not going to do that. So we're going to do a return at some stage. So sometimes it's a good idea to just give it a default return. So double diff. So now we need to check, based on that double diff, if the difference equals 0. So don't make a mistake and do this, because what you're doing is actually giving diff the value of 0. So it's double equals to check its value. So we'll return if the difference is greater than 0, then we'll return 1. And of course we want that all to run as one structure, so use your else. So if this, then this, and just our last one. So if it's not 0 and it's not greater than 0, then well, it has to be less than 0. So we don't need to do another if statement because it's kind of obvious. And we'll return -1. So actually we don't need that, because we've caught all cases. So if we just make that a bit clearer. Now you can see what I'm doing is I'm just separating blocks of code just to make sure that it's nice and easier to see and to view that code. So now let's create a new rectangle. So if we just get rid of all this. So we could create a rectangle that way, or you could create a rectangle this way. So we'll say R1 and R2. So just two different ways to create a rectangle. Here we'll set and R2. And we'll just set the width as well for these. So you can see we've created two rectangles and they're both the exact same data to it. So let's just do a compare. So we'll do R1 dot it's interesting if I just save that, that should really come up. So we say R2 dot compare. Okay. Okay, so we are going to get a comparison between R2 and R1. So that method actually returns an int. If we go back down again. So that returns an int. So we need to capture that int. So we're going to capture that int in that method when that method returns, and we're going to put it into result. So if result, and then we'll just print out something. Okay, so, and then maybe just do an if else. A catch-all. I don't really care what the value is if it's not equal. So something basic like that. And if we just run it now, so we should get, yes, rectangles are the same. Okay, so that's just an example of implementing an interface. So that interface is actually, it's just empty. All it says is that if you implement this interface, you must create this method, this exact int. It returns an int and it takes in a type of object. Okay, that's it.